Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Wednesday morning, November the 3rd. I'm glad to be here. This is One Shot Abuse Survivor to Another, and I'm just waking up, having a coffee, and chat room is open. I popped the link in there and wanted to continue looking at an article from angerresources.com, www.angerresources, ANGERESOURCES.com, from Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz. And yeah, it's good to be here. You know, this is a live internet radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. We'll be on for half an hour. And, I'm glad to be able to do these shows. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. And it's just awesome. I'd really, wouldn't be really worth doing if people weren't listening. I have 14,000 shows listened to, so somebody's certainly listening to my shows, and I really appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Thank you very much. I wanted to look at this article that I think is really good. It's called "The Domestic Abuse Has to Stop," and I'll just give you the full the title to it. It's called "The Domestic Abuse Has to Stop, and It Can." It's by Dave Decker, and you can go on that website, www.angerresources.com, and get all kinds of information there. There's self-tests, and it has lots to do with lots of articles about road rage and how to handle our relationships with each other so that we're not abusive towards each other and because of our anger issues, right? Lots and lots of good information. There's counseling and services, seminars, and tools and resources on that website, and links and facts, all kinds of good stuff, books and videos. It's a great website from Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz, and I hope everybody will go check it out. Lots and lots of info. We're not going to cover it all. I just wanted to touch on the stuff that I felt dealt with my own survivor issues as far as being angry goes, you know what I mean? So that's where we're at. And I'll be back in just 1 second, okay? Okay, sorry about that. I had to go get my bunny. I have a little baby bunny, and he's not a baby anymore. He's 5 years old, and he was chewing on something he wasn't supposed to be chewing on, so I had to go get him because he'll just tear everything apart. So, all right, so I wanted to continue on looking at this. We were reading through what Dave Decker had to say about the domestic abuse has to stop, and it can. And, he said that, sadly enough, in the United States, a woman is more likely to be assaulted, injured, raped, or killed by a male partner than by any other type of assailant. And that domestic violence has been identified as one of our country's most significant public health concerns, and not just in terms of its impact on women who are abused, but also due to its damaging and long-lasting impact on the children who grow up in a family where domestic abuse is occurring, and on the men who are perpetrating the abuse. And we all know men can be abused too. So, but Dave Decker's specifically kind of talking, to men in a lot of his stuff, and pointing out that there are some serious issues with men who abuse and who have anger issues, right? But women do too. Women do too, and that's the whole issue. Women are not excluded from this, and men and women can be abusive, and they can both have anger issues, right? So that's the thing. This information really is good for anybody, right? So I'm not a professional counselor. I'm not a therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk show, so you have to listen at your own discretion because I'm talking about everything to do with abuse, and it's a very sensitive, touchy subject. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable listening to or even, hearing about this stuff. So if it makes you uncomfortable, it's your discretion. You have to turn the show off. So listen at your own discretion. And young children under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you who's an adult who can help you make the decision whether you should listen or not, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows. And I'm really fighting to protect children at all times. And I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And we're fighting for to uphold child rights and protection for children, right? So you have to keep yourself safe, And you have to do that especially when you're online. You have to be very careful what you're doing, and that's why I ask people under the age of 18 to get someone to listen to the show with you, an adult. If you have a parent who cares, I really hope you do, or a teacher, counselor, someone at school that you trust that has a good head on their shoulders that can listen to one of my shows with you, and you can see if it's something you should be listening to, right? Because it is there's a lot of adult content on my shows. And I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows. So it's very important that you keep yourself safe and protected at all times. So we'll get right into this article. And we read through that whole piece there, and he says that one of the most important ways to begin to intervene in domestic abuse is to understand what abusive behavior is. And he says that most of my clients have said that they're not even aware that they've been doing, that what they've been doing is considered abuse, he said. And this is the focus of the remainder of this article. Domestic abuse can be divided into several different categories, which are discussed below. So he has clients and stuff that he works with, and he's a therapist, and so is Michael Obsatz, and they both work with people in the area of anger management and all kinds of stuff. So he says that many of his clients don't even know that what they're doing is considered abuse, and that's what we left off yesterday morning, and that's the whole issue. A lot of people don't realize that what they're doing is abusive behavior if they grew up around it. It might be something that they've been doing their whole life, and no one's pointed out that it's abusive, and they might have been told that it's abusive, but still don't believe it. It's just a lot of people don't even realize what they're doing is abuse, right? So it's important that we all know and take a good look at our own behavior, I think, because obviously we can't control what somebody else does, but we can control what we do, and I think that's the important thing, and that's where Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz are trying to help people out on this website, because they're really pointing out that our behavior, is our responsibility, and if every single person on this planet was keeping their own behavior in check, we wouldn't have these problems. We wouldn't have these abuses going on, this child abuse issues, and which is absolutely ridiculous and horrific. Domestic violence, which to me is just as bad, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So the different categories that he's talking about here is male entitlement, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, threats, violence toward property or pets, sexual abuse, physical abuse, right? And he goes on to talk about this stuff. So that's what we're going to read through this morning. And we'll start with the first one. He says the first category is male entitlement, which is having an attitude that conveys male dominance and the idea that we as men are more competent and capable than women. And he's talking to men here, right? This attitude leads to the belief that I, as a man, have the right and the responsibility to control how my partner thinks, feels, and acts, and to make her into the person I want her to be, quote unquote. And as he says, as was mentioned previously, this desire to control underlies all abusive behavior. Some examples of this category might be making generalizations and believing stereotypes about women, having the expectation that we as men will make all the important decisions in the relationship, determining who does what in terms of household chores and parenting, controlling how household money is handled and spent, and acting very jealous and possessive. So that's what he had to say about the male entitlement. And, it's just kind of interesting because, not all men are like that, and that's a fact. There's, not all men have these issues, but some really do. Excuse me, and in my lifetime I've actually met lots and lots of people like that, lots and lots of men who thought that, they were the ones they were the smart ones, they were the ones that knew how to handle, the whole household stuff. I grew up, and knew some people like that who had those kind of attitudes, just wanting to control everything in the home. And my dad was like that. And that's why the abuse happened between my mom and my dad, right? And when my siblings were all younger, my dad was very much like that. I wasn't even born yet. And he was controlling everything, including all the money and the food. And he was, jealous, and he was possessive, and he was quite abusive. He was very much an abusive man towards my mother. And then after I came along, my mom started to fight back, see. So, he couldn't control everything. She took the checkbook away from him, and because the bills weren't getting paid and there wasn't any food in the house. He was buying furniture and bringing furniture in, but there was no food, and he didn't care, right? Because wasn't thinking right. He wasn't thinking properly. So he just wanted to impress his Air Force buddies, and so my mom said that he went out and bought a bunch of nice furniture, but the kids were starving and they were like sharing like a potato for dinner and stuff. She said so she had to like by force take the checkbook away from him, so she could get some money to buy some food. So that's the thing, he was controlling the whole thing for a long, long time, and he still did to some degree when after, later on in their marriage and after I was born, right? And I saw some of this behavior, not all of it, but some of it. So that's the thing. It happens, and it's not right. No one really has the right to do that to their partner. I don't care whether it's a man or a woman. It's not cool. And it's like, they think that what they do is so much more important, and that their ideas are the only ones that count, and that, they need to make their partner be what they want them to be instead of allowing their partner to be who they are, and learning to love that person for who they are. And it's like, my parents did not love each other for who they were, and I knew this, right? And so it was kind of hard to watch them because I was just like, why can't you guys just be happy? And why can't you guys just, learn to love each other? Then, like, after like 30, 40 years, it gets pretty old, right? And it's a ridiculous way to live your life, you know what I mean? I hope that anybody who's out there who's in a domestic violence situation will get some help, because you certainly don't deserve to be abused. And if you're the abuser, then you need to stop abusing, right? My oldest sister was the abuser in her marriage, and she was the one who controlled the marriage because she grew up she was the firstborn in the family, and she grew up with my parents, of course, being the first child born. She didn't want to see what happened between my mom and our mom and dad happen to her, so she took over the relationship with her husband, and she was the controller. She was like, no way am I going to spend my life listening to some man, telling me what to do, and watching man push me around, because that's what she had been watching as she grew up, my parents fighting and stuff. So she took over the relationship and was very abusive to her husband because of that, right? Because she was like, no way anybody's going to get me. I'm going to get them first. And that was our attitude in the family, like that we kind of all did that, because when you grow up around a lot of abuse, you take on a protective measure, and you're like, okay, when I get into a relationship, I'm going to make sure that I am not pushed around, and quite often end up being the abuser ourselves. So it's not right. It's not right at all. And if we're the abusers, then we need to stop that behavior. And if we're not and we're being abused, then we need to get some help, because this is absolutely ridiculous. And I grew up in it. I ate it and drank it every day, my whole entire life, and I was so. Let me tell you, it did a lot of damage, and it was very destructive to be in that environment all the time. And so, it's not funny, and it's absolutely horrible, and I feel, I really feel for people who are in it right now, and I would just say get some help, man. The next one, a second category, is emotional abuse, which is using nonverbal or behavioral methods to hurt, punish, intimidate, or control. So using nonverbal or behavioral methods to hurt, punish, intimidate, or control. That's what he says here. Our partner. Examples might include sulking or pouting, sneering, acting disgusted, glaring or staring, yelling and screaming, or following a partner around the house to continue an argument that she doesn't want to do, right? And that could go for women, too, doing the same thing to a guy. I know, because I used to do that to my sweetheart. And so, I watched that my whole entire life and was part of that. And it was said that inflicted upon me, emotional abuse in our home was just the way it was, Somebody was always sulking, pouting, sneering, acting disgusted, glaring, staring, yelling, and screaming, following us around and arguing when they don't want to. That was just the way I grew up, using nonverbal behaviors methods to hurt, punish, intimidate, or control. Or, it's horrible, absolutely horrible what that does to people. And, a lot of people think that physical abuse is the worst. It is when it kills you or puts you in the hospital with a bunch of broken bones and internal injuries. But the real damage comes to the heart, to the very spirit, and to the very soul of a person by emotional, psychological abuse and verbal abuse, right? That's where the real damage comes in. I'm sorry, but I've been through all of it, so I know, what really hurt me was what they did to my heart. that's what was killing me. It wasn't the physical abuse. I didn't appreciate the physical abuse, and it did cause me some problems because I was, what do you want to say, kind of like gun shy, you know what I mean? And also, I was all kind of not wanting people to touch me, and I didn't want people to. So, if somebody would come to hug me, and I just kind of, I still do today, kind of shy away. You know what I mean? It's like it's just a natural response, right? And the physical abuse causes a lot of shame and within ourselves. It does cause a lot of shame and rage. But the thing is what really, really hurt me and really caused a lot of damage later on in life was the emotional, psychological abuse. So I know what that's all about. And verbal abuse, it's horrible, absolutely horrible to do that to people. And the third category is verbal abuse, which is using words to hurt, punish, intimidate, and control a partner. This can include criticizing and discounting a partner's feelings and opinions, interrupting her, interrogating her, swearing and cussing at her or around her, being demanding and insulting or ridiculing her or other people she cares about. And that's the thing that can happen. Women can do the same thing, And so, this isn't just for men. It's for women are like that too. And it's a horrible, and when you grow up around that, you can't help but take that on as a behavior, right? So I was doing that to other people too, and as a young person as well as into my 20s and then into my own relationships, it's hard. I had to learn how to not do that. So I had to learn how to not behave like my parents had taught me how to behave, right? And that's the thing. It's hard to undo all that. But see, that's the problem with a lot of people. They grow up in these homes where there's no respect, there's just no care, there's a lot of abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, even some physical abuse, and they just take that on as a behavior. This is all very much learned behaviors. And, if we have to go back and unlearn it and learn how to treat people right. And that's the whole issue with abusers, If they don't want to do that, there isn't much you can do to make them change their mind. You know what I mean? I mean, I could never get my mom to change her mind about me. You know what I mean? We actually got along for a few years after I grew up and hit the age of about 18, 19. We started to try to get along, and then because she realized that she was gonna rely on me for everything because she didn't want my dad having anything to do with her. So she kind of put me as a codependent, kind of put me in there as her. In place of my dad, as for not for sexual purposes, but for everything else, emotional support, getting her to the doctor, getting her prescriptions, helping her out, trying to keep the peace because I was always keeping them apart, because I was after about the age of 18, 19, they could no longer kick me around, and so, I was just too big and too old, and they were getting too old, and so the physical abuse stopped, right? The other stuff didn't. But the thing is my mom kind of realized that if she wanted to have me as an ally and wanted me to stay in the home, she better start treating me a little bit better. So she did, and we actually got along for quite a few years after that. Had a few spats, here and there, but it wasn't nothing like it used to be when I was growing up. And I truly thought that she loved me and that she really was making amends. She never did apologize for her behavior towards me, but as far as the verbal and physical and emotional, psychological abuse she had put on me, she never really did apologize for it. But I was okay with it because we were getting along, and I was thinking, this is great, finally, developing some type of relationship with my mom. And then at the age of 29, she dropped the bomb on me and told me that she never did want me. She did not love me. She didn't love any of her children, did not want us, and that we were not worth anything to her. And she just totally ripped my heart out, by doing that. And that's the whole issue. People are so hurtful with words. It can literally kill a person, I couldn't believe that she told me that, and it was just, I was like, you got to be kidding me. You had the opportunity to let us go years before when the courts wanted to take us out of the home, and she begged the courts to let us stay in the home because of the abuse, right? She said, no, these are my children, don't take my children. She begged and pleaded the courts, and they said, okay, well, you have to go to counseling, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, right? You have to meet all these things in order for the children to stay in the home. And we had social workers coming by. I had to strip for the social workers, and they were checking me out. And this is absolutely ridiculous. We stayed in this home, and then the abuse continued on. And then for her to tell me that at the age of 29, it was just like somebody had totally ripped my heart out and just blew it up with a bomb. You know what I mean? I was just devastated. I couldn't believe it. And her behavior after that was even worse. And she started to really go back to the way that she was when I was a child. But she was so old and sick that she couldn't physically beat on me anymore. But her words were just cutting me in two. She was just like poison. She was like cancer. And that's how people can be, you know. And that's the whole issue. It's horrible what people will do to each other. We can't take this on and do these types of behaviors in our own lives, you know. Just because I was abused as a child does not mean that I have the right to go and hurt somebody just because I'm hurting. And that's what a lot of men do, and that's what a lot of abusers do. You know, they might have been so really wounded at one point, taking on these behaviors, but it's not an excuse. There's no excuse for abuse, and I don't care what kind of home we grew up in or what kind of circumstances, there's no excuse for it. Because there's help out there. There's no reason why somebody shouldn't take a look at their own behavior or be shown their behavior and say, look, you know, you're abusive, you need to stop your abusive behavior, get some help, you know, that they wouldn't take a good hard look at themselves and say, man, I guess I am, maybe I better straighten up, you know. But people don't care, you know, like my mom, she ended up hurting me, you know, because she was so unhappy herself. You know, and that's what she had done my whole entire life. She was so miserable herself that she selfishly abused me because she was mad because I was born, because I was a nuisance, because I was in the house, I was in the way, I was not wanted, I was this, I was that, right? I mean, how incredibly selfish and absolutely horrible to do that to your child just because you're hurting. So my mom was hurting, so she hurt me, right? That's what I'm trying to say. My dad was hurting, so he hurt my mom. So that's the whole issue. My parents were both abused as children. They hurt their children because they were hurting. I mean, there's no excuse for that. And I don't condone that. I don't give them any kind of, you know, oh, it's okay, you know. No. You know, that was all wrong. What they did was completely wrong. And the courts had to, you know, wanted to remove us, and they should have let us go. And then they should have actually said, look, okay, you know, we can't continue to bring our children up like this. We're going to have to let them go until we get some help. And, you know, the courts would have given us back once they proved that they could look after us. But my parents split the country and took off with us, so that's what happened. And, you know, back in like 1970s, you know, 1971, 1972, nobody cared if you hurt your family. They didn't care. You know, I mean, you could do whatever you wanted to your children, even out in public, and nobody would say anything. You know, it's like I know because I saw it myself. You know, nobody cared, but nowadays people do, and they, you know, there's laws against child abuse, and there's laws against this kind of stuff, right? So that's the thing. It's not so people hide it a little bit better nowadays, right? Back in the old days, they would just lash out right in public. They didn't care. Then people still do that here now too, and they get busted, right? And that's the thing. I think a lot of abuse is hidden away now because people know. They're not allowed to do that to their children or to their family members, right? It's against the law. And so, you know, they'll just do that in private now. So it's a little bit more hidden away, right? So they said that the fourth category is threats. It says, which is communicating an intention to do something designed to create emotional pain, fear, indecision, and insecurity. So, and this category includes both non-physical threats and also violent threats. And so the non-physical threats are like telling her that you are going to withhold money, sue her friends and family for interfering in your relationship or in the relationship. So that's like non-physical threats. It can also include violent threats like standing in her way, making statements like you're really asking for it, I really feel like letting you have it, or driving recklessly when you are angry with her, or making physically intimidating gestures that, like holding up a fist in front of her face. And this works for women too. Like my sister was very violent towards her husband, and my oldest sister, she's passed away now, but she was miserable, and I wouldn't have wanted to be her in her family either. She was just, you know, quite almost just as bad as my mom, you know, but she grew up with my mom as her mom, so that's the whole issue. I don't know why anybody would. There's people in my family that just think they just don't understand the whole issue because they're just in denial, but they would think that that's not true, but it was completely true. And you know, it's horrible, right? The non-physical threats, you know, threatening is just bad news, you know. If you grow up around being threatened and stuff like that, it's horrible, even if it's non-physical. My Dad was always threatening my mom. He was always threatening to kill her, first of all, and he was always threatening to kill all the children. But my mom was too, so it wasn't any real difference there. They were both threatening to kill each other, and they were both threatening to kill the children, so to kill us or to kill us all, right? So for different reasons, my mom would always generally threaten to kill herself or us. Like if she was mad at me, she would say, I should have killed you, or I could kill you. And that was quite, like, she would say stuff like that to me quite a bit, like especially in my teen years, early teens, like, just coming out of 12, 13, 14, she would say stuff like, I should just kill you, and I should have killed you, and she would choke me and stuff like that. And she was very violent, and then the violent threats. I watched my parents treat each other like this, right? They were very violent, and my dad was always saying stuff like, you're asking for it or whatever, and my mom would do the same thing to him too later on in life, because she would smash him with everything she could get her hands on, So they were very much violent, vicious, violent people. Right. And the thing is, my dad would drive, he was like a crazy man in the car, and I used to hate to get in the car with him because, I never knew if we'd be alive at the end of the journey or not, because he was absolutely crazy, driving like a crazy person. And I used to, sometimes I'd be in the back seat, oh my God, we're going to die. And because he'd be my mom would be screaming at him, and he'd be barreling down the road in his station wagon 120 miles an hour, and they'd be arguing and pissed off. Just after a trip to the store, we'd have gone to the store and stuff, but see, it was so psychologically damaging. They were always threatening each other, and I was always concerned he was going to kill us all, And that's a hard way to live. It's a hard way to grow up. It's a hard way to live, and I know people actually continued that on. I grew up in that, and then a lot of my friends ended up in these types of relationships where, my friend's boyfriend was also abusive towards me because I was hanging around. I was a threat to him because I was there to protect my friend. And so he didn't like me because I was there to make sure that he wasn't going to hurt my friend, right? And so the whole issue is that he was quite often threatening to kill me because of it, and, somewhat physically abusive to me too. And it was a little bit scary because he was always on drugs, massive amounts of drugs. And one time he was in the front seat. We were driving after he'd been nearly arrested for beating up my friend in his bathroom, and he was in the front seat with me, which was really stupid because the sheriff lady, she wanted to sit in the back with her daughter, and the only place for him was in the front seat. I wanted to leave him behind. I thought that he should have just grabbed a cab or something like that. But let me tell you, that was the worst ride home I have ever taken in my lifetime. Because he kept looking at the steering wheel, he kept looking at me, he kept looking at the steering wheel, like he wanted to wreck my car. He wanted to grab my steering wheel, and I knew what his intentions were, and I'm telling you, it was a scary ride home. And being around people like that who will threaten to end your life or intimidate you or, make you feel like your life is over. I grew up like that, you know what I mean? Like I grew up with the possibility and the real threat that my parents could kill us. My dad was very psychologically messed up and used to walk around at night saying that he should kill us all because we were from the devil and God would be pleased if he killed us all. And, he would always try to get me to drink all these prescription type drinks, and because he was always my parents were always on a lot of prescription pills, and I would just be like, no, I don't want any, and he'd be like trying to force me to. I would think he was going to poison me. I did not trust my parents. Like I didn't trust my parents at all. But that's because they had proven themselves untrustworthy because they were so abusive. So that's the whole issue. If you're in that kind of situation and you're living like that, get yourself some help. Do not stay in a relationship like that. I'm sorry, but you know what? Your life does matter. Your life does count. You absolutely do matter. And so you cannot allow yourself to be abused and mistreated like that and hurt and killed at the hands of somebody else, right? It's absolutely horrible what people do to each other. We see this stuff every day rolling out in the papers, but I lived it. And so that's the whole issue. You don't want to have to live like that. And if somebody is hurting you, you need to get help. And you need to realize that you do count, you're important, your life does matter, and that, you don't deserve to be treated like that, right? And it's a decision, it's a very conscious decision you have to make. And it's like, I had to make the decision that I wanted to live and that I did not deserve to be treated like that. And no one does, right? So have a minute left here. We'll finish this off tomorrow, and I'll be back on tonight with my own show as well as Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. So you can check my show page there. And tonight I'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio too at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, I hope you have a great day. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Make sure you get some help and not suffer alone in silence and sadness and just suffering on your own. That's a horrible way to live. I would hope that you can reach out and find, whatever, whether it's a therapist, counselor, group support, online group support, call a crisis line, whatever you have to do, to get some help, right? It's so important. I mean, we do not deserve to suffer like this, and you certainly did not deserve it. If you've been abused, it was not your fault. I'm sorry. It never is. It's the abuser's fault. And the shame and all that does not belong to you. It belongs to the abuser, right? So remember that and get some help, right? Make sure you reach out to somebody, anybody, to get some help, right? So have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Love all you guys very much. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.